You're still watching Live at 9. In the wake of COVID-19, good nutrition has been encouraged as a mechanism to prevent, fight and recover from the infection. Now more than ever, good and healthy feeding becomes very critical as an element in having a well-functioning immune system. The reopening of schools places the good feeding debate in the provision for pupils and students with a well-balanced diet amidst the COVID-19 pandemic and the expectations from the schools on the same. Now joining us on Weekend Live Chat is Rachel Anako. He's a legal practitioner promoting social justice and food and adequate living rights. For this discussion, this is Weekend Live Chat. So you're welcome to Weekend Live Chat.
Thank you, Mabel.
Start us off and place the food rights when it comes to who is responsible, what the legalities are between the school and the parents.
Oh, thank you so much, Mabel. So under the law, we have an act on education, both primary, post-primary and primary school, which was passed in 2008. So under that law, parents have the entire responsibility of feeding their children while in school. So they either contribute in monetary terms or food itself. Let's say those in rural areas, you'd find someone taking posho itself to school as contribution for feeding. Then others could choose to pack food for their children. Then in addition to that, we have a policy that was issued in 2013 in conformity with that law to ensure that parents actually play their part when it comes to that responsibility.
Okay, so critics of school feeding diets don't mostly or speak against posho and beans as good feeding. And now you're telling us that the parents have the responsibility in the provision of their children receiving this right. So then what do we have to say about the school's involvement in the provision of this, in having that well-balanced diet?
Well, we have, in a situation like this one where we've been having COVID-19, we have to factor in the fact that many have been hit seriously by the effects of the virus. Others have lost their jobs. Parents have been struggling to get money to take their children to school. So I do not know if the parent-led system that we've been having before is actually going to be effective in this case. So it needs everyone really has to put a hand in this to make sure we really have the education sector move forward past this period. Okay,
so does that go back to the Ministry of Education in regulating school feeding? Because we see it in many other countries that are actually way progressing in terms of development programs on school feeding for children. So in addition to this, what can the Ministry of Education do?
Well, for starters, the government has a responsibility to set policies on everything else that concerns education. And as that, it does not have to exclude food because it's a very critical element in achieving the right to education. So I would advise that government should actually direct schools to observe and make sure that every child has enjoyed their right to food and nutrition. And then also we should create a linkage between the agricultural sector and education. In that case, I'm looking at school farms. We've had those, like in my school we had that. So you'd find that we'd have supplements to these diets in school.
Okay. It's now the era of increased, unfortunately, teenage pregnancies, the 2 years of the lockdown and the COVID-19 after effects, pregnant learners in schools. And we're talking about school feeding, the responsibility on the parents, not on the schools. Speak to this debate on what actually a pregnant learner is going to be undergoing and how better she can actually have that well-balanced diet while at school.
Well, there we'll go back to the statistics that we had before COVID. About only 33% of school-going students were receiving food in schools. That was before COVID, with still the parent-led feeding system. So just imagine, with the effects of COVID, and then we have a new category, not a new category, but fortunately we have all students, even those who are pregnant, being allowed to return to school. So that means schools really have to really improve on the feeding they have, in this case, to cater for even this category of students. So it needs effort from everyone. Just like I said before, schools have to be directed on observing the right to food and nutrition for all students.
What should they incorporate for now, the pregnant learners? You called it, the category, that is now in schools.
So commonly, we all know posho and beans is the usual in school, but reasonably, I think if you supplement it with greens, a vegetable, on the side of it, fruit where it is possible, really. Yes, so I think that would also do.
Okay. And any more contributions from government to make this situation of good and health living more effective going forward? This is not a conversation that actually usually comes up, yet it's part of educating a child.
I beg your pardon on the first part of the question.
Contributions that government can actually fast forward make in this situation.
Well, government in its role entirely, just like I mentioned earlier, it has been concentrating majorly on teachers' welfare, structures in school, but then now at this point it goes way beyond that. That is why it really needs to come close and not really give the burden to only the parents to handle this. Yes. Yes. So policies, whatever it takes, guidelines to regulate feeding in schools. Yes.
If this debate is coming up right now, then what will the schools say when it comes to increasing the school fees? It was a big debate, actually. So if it's regulating feeding and now there are all these school programs, well, won't it go back to increasing school tuition or even requirements?
Yes, you're very right, of which the burden also go back to the parents. Yes, and that is why I brought in that bit of the agriculture sector and education would actually create a linkage, and it would really take us far in that regard. We would have school farms, not only in theory for agriculture, but also the practical aspect, and then at the end of the day, you have a proper meal as a student in school.
Finally, do our children know about their food rights?
Well, I do not think the students really know they really have this right. They will know I'm hungry, I need food, who is going to give it to me? I think that is all they know. Yes.
Okay. But basically, if they are watching, especially those in their schools or even those that might hear the conversation, what are those basics that they should know about their food rights?
Yes, to all children out there, you have a right to adequate food and nutrition, and your parents, of course, have the primary obligation to provide food for you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Rachel Anako. You were watching Weekend Live Chat here on NBS Live at 9. We're going